Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Patagna. That is Tom Loy, our substitute teacher for today as Andrew Ivins. Well, guess what? He's a dad, healthy baby. We're excited about that. But he's going to be on the bench for a couple weeks, so it's going to be a lot of Tom, a lot of Bud Elliott, a lot of people filling in here. Good thing is we got a lot to talk about. Let's take a look on what's on tap for today, recapping the latest transfer portal news, the latest intel on the top 10 prospects in the class of 2026. And Louisville quarterback Miller Moss joins the show as well, which I'm looking forward to. A lot to talk about there. But, Tom, transfer portal's popping, dude. Let's start with Colorado. Obviously, we all wonder what's it going to look like without Shedeur Sanders. He's off to the NFL, projected top 10 pick. Julian Lewis, guy highly touted out of Carrollton High School. If you've been following us at 24/7 Sports, you know that's a name that we are very familiar with. Caden Salter is the guy, though. It looks like Deion Sanders is going to tab out of the transfer portal. That news just came from Matt Zenitz. Spent a couple years at Liberty, highly touted guy, recruited to Tennessee. I think this is a pretty good fit. But, Tom, I want to ask you from the high school side of things. I mean, how do you think it marries up with the timeline of Julian Lewis?
It's going to be pretty interesting. That's going to be a really good battle. I like the fit for Caden Salter, and I actually think this could actually benefit Julian Lewis a lot as soon as he gets there and those guys compete. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for both. I don't think that Caden Salter was assured he's going to be QB1 upon arrival. I have a pretty good feeling that Julian Lewis had a pretty strong feeling that he was going to be the guy. So whether there was discussions about the portal, I think you have to assume every school is going to go that route. So you got to know there's going to be some competition in that room. But I think that he's going to push Julian to be better and vice versa. Julian is advanced. He's polished. He's extremely strong mentally. I think the back and forth is going to be fun to watch. But it's going to be a really good battle spring into summer and into the fall camp. So I actually really like this fit, and I think it's going to push both of them.
Caden Salter, top 100 prospect, number 11 quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports. Obviously a guy that I think the ideal bridge quarterback. So there'll be a lot of talk on that with Caden Salter, how he fits in Deion Sanders, Pat Shurmur's offense, and we'll see what that looks like. Guys, like I said, we appreciate you joining us as always. You can find us on X and on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. And like I said, that portal's popping. Another name that jumped in there today, Patrick Payton. Talk about a guy that is uber productive, the edge out of Florida State, leaned into the portal last year, came back. He's got 16 career sacks. He makes his debut as a number 2 player in the portal, so obviously some big names still coming off the board as well. Speaking of big names, let's talk about USC, man. Missing a lot of production here. Zachariah Branch, the former 5-star, one of the best players in the country, one of the best players in the portal, top 5 at his position. He jumps in there along with Deuce Robinson, another guy that they had high hopes for. All of a sudden, Tom, you're looking at USC. It's been a rough couple days. You could say it's been a rough couple weeks for Lincoln Riley. They lose 3 of their top 5 receivers. That's over 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns as well. And I didn't even mention Kyron Hudson to that piece of the puzzle as well. I don't know, just from where you're sitting, what's your kind of pulse on USC? And, you know, we talked a lot about them on the high school side of things as well, and where kind of Lincoln Riley sits going into a pivotal year next year.
Yeah, I think this was a tough one for USC. I think losing Zachariah Branch, who's a lifelong diehard fan of USC, and obviously his brother Zion Branch as well. And obviously they're going to end up at the same school. They're going to team up. And for me, when I was looking at this initially, the first thought popped in my head, because I do know how close him and Miller Moss are. I thought, hey, maybe they're going to take this connection from USC to Louisville. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the Cardinals here. There's some chatter that maybe that's just not going to be the right fit for Branch, and he's going to look elsewhere. Keeping an eye on Georgia. Chris Hummer's been all over this one early. We've only had about 24 hours to really find out where Zachariah and Zion are going to go. Georgia's definitely a school that we're watching, but I feel like that marriage at Louisville would be pretty special for them. Deuce Robinson can go pretty much anywhere he wants. It seems like everybody's pushing really hard, and nothing's really done there. But kind of just going back to Louisville, I think that Louisville's going to do what they can to make a run at a couple of those guys leaving USC, because they do want to make sure that Miller's well taken care of with guys around him. Because I think they have a chance to be really special as a group next year.
Do not contact tag for Zachariah Branch, which is kind of fascinating. Georgia seems to be the team right now, at least has the most buzz around him. When you talk to Chris Hummer and Matt Zenitz, we'll see what happens. I'm sure Mario Cristobal, Miami, trying to get in there as well, along with a couple other teams. And Louisville's not one of those teams to sleep on. I mean, they're well equipped, especially financially.
It will take care of you
from an NIL standpoint. So we'll see what happens with Zachariah Branch. I think the other wrinkle there is that he wants to play with his brother, Zion Branch, who was a former top 247 safety as well. We'll see which one of those schools would be comfortable pairing those two guys together. Remember, scholarship limit goes from 85 to 105, so that makes it a little bit easier to absorb a package deal like that. So we'll see what happens there. The guy at the top of the board, John Mateer, quarterback from Washington State, we've been monitoring this one for a while. It's been tough up there in Pullman, man. You think about Jake Dickert, he's off to Wake Forest today as Clausen leaves there. Now you think about Mateer, consecutive years, man. You're losing two of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. First it was Cam Ward, now it's Mateer. You think about the schools involved here. Oklahoma seems to be the team right now, and they absolutely have to have him. Ben Arbuckle, his offensive coordinator. Miami seems to be the other team, obviously with the connection to Cam Ward, trying to get involved. But it does seem at this point that there is a clear favorite. That being said, we know that anything can happen. John Mateer, man, I think obviously the number one player in the portal for a reason, the most dynamic guy. Oklahoma's got to have this dude.
He kind of fires me up. I had not seen much about him until you guys slapped that number one ranking on him. And the more I looked into it, I don't know. There's a lot to like there. I think he could have a monster season if he picks Oklahoma and kind of keeps that thing rolling with his OC. But again, I kind of initially, we talked about this a little bit at Wake this morning. I brought up Wake Forest. Obviously, the head coach leaves and he's talking about how he's the best quarterback and best player in college football. And then all of a sudden he's at Wake Forest now. Do you see that as a possible fit? Do you think they could make a move there? And obviously, if you think that marriage would be a good one,
I think that would be that'd be the wild card of the wild card if Wake Forest was able to get the number one player in the country. I think Oklahoma's got their hooks in here. Is kind of what it feels like in terms of the offensive coordinator. Here's the thing, though: Nick Anderson, their leading receiver from 2 years ago, just left, signed with LSU. You think about Oklahoma, their receiving corps, they're decimated by injuries last year. Whole new offensive line. So if you're Mateer right now and you're out there and you're an Oklahoma fan or you're a Miami fan, and you're trying to figure out, all right, where's this guy going? What situation is more appealing? You know, you got Francis Mauigoa coming back at tackle for Miami. They have some pieces. They lost Isaiah Horton as well. Miami trying to do some things offensively. They went out. They got C.J. Daniels from LSU. But if you're John Mateer, you got 1 year to kind of or 1 or 2 years to kind of put this whole thing together. What's the more appealing place? I don't know. And quite honestly, I don't know if there's a clear favorite there that's like, if I'm John Mateer, you're saying, all right, this place is prime, ready to go. The continuity with Ben Arbuckle, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's probably where the advantage is right now.
I think that makes the most sense. And if you take money off the table, I think that is the easiest, smoothest transition. But I will say, obviously, the proof is in the pudding. What Miami did this year with Cam Ward, what he could do next year, there's going to be talent, there's going to be speed around him. If I was advising him, I think Miami would be the pick. But again, that's taking off all money off the table and obviously coaching fits because he's obviously going to have a comfort level with the OC.
There's a lot of money on the table. Money is on the table right now in the transfer portal. The other thing about Mateer, the dual threat capability. So when you talk about an offensive line that's maybe rebuilding like Oklahoma, the legs are so important. 3,100 yards through the air, another 800 on the ground. He had 15 touchdowns on the ground as well, 44 touchdowns. This guy's a pocket rocket. He's a lot of fun. Just in terms of the dynamic that he is able to bring, he might be worth 2 or 3 more wins for whatever team is out there. Maybe it's Oklahoma, maybe it's Miami, maybe there's another team out there that we're discounting as well. Speaking of quarterbacks, I think when people look at the quarterback rankings for 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal, a lot of people are trying to figure out, all right, how do you kind of marry up projection and production? And John Mateer and Luke Kromenhoek are 2 great examples of guys that are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Kromenhoek was a guy that we had as a top 40 passer in the country coming out last year. He's got to play early. The Florida State situation is terrible. They win 2 or 3 games, whatever it was there. They go through DJ Uiagalelei. They go through Brock Glenn. And all of a sudden, it's freshman Luke Kromenhoek, who a couple years ago was playing safety, right? So this is fascinating. But he ends up at Mississippi State. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at Jeff Lebby, and it's like, Van Buren's gone. He's in the portal. He did some nice things. He ends up at LSU inside the conference. This is not a consolation prize, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Michael Van Buren. But if you're Mississippi State, coming off the year that you had, you lost Kevin Coleman, you lost Mario Craver. You're losing a lot of guys in the portal. They're also doing a good job getting those guys back. Luke Kromenhoek, it might not be the most talked about because the impact might not be so much short-term, but the long-term impact of this program, having a franchise signal caller for Mississippi State, I think is a huge, huge deal here.
I always get a little worried about guys that I don't think are completely ready to be day one guys. I think about the class, and I think about like a Julian Sayin or a CJ Carr. Those guys could have stepped in and been guys. I didn't see that with Luke Kromenhoek. But fast forwarding, I feel like the experience he got at Florida State is going to help him as long as he's not rattled mentally. And I love the fit with Jeff Lebby. So I think that pairing, he probably could have gone somewhere else and got a little bit more money, maybe found a better depth chart, whatever the case may be. I love the fit with Jeff Lebby. I think he's going to get the most out of him. I think he's going to get a ton out of him quicker than he would have gone elsewhere if he was chasing the money or chasing a different fit. I love the marriage. I think that this is going to be really, really good for both parties moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot out there from the message board warriors about what was to be made about, Luke Kromenhoek's demands to stay at Florida State and what that looked like. And they bring in Gus Malzahn over from UCF, and they got a new OC. And then they go out and they get Thomas Castellanos. Like, if you're a Florida State fan, I think you have a legitimate question to say, hey, are we in better shape with Thomas Castellanos and Gus Malzahn than we were with a Kromenhoek, and maybe being aggressive in the portal and surrounding that guy? So we'll see what happens there. Big get for Mississippi State. They got their guy, their future. Another trend I think I want to talk about that I think we're on the tip of the spear here a little bit, but Jalen Mbakwe, former 5-star, enters the portal a day or two later, withdraws from the portal. Amaris Williams, former 5-star as well. Freshman, both of these guys at Auburn, enters the portal, withdraws only a day later. I think this is just like hostile negotiating tactics. I think that's what it is at the end of the day. And in this day and age, I don't know if I really blame them, quite honestly. They probably both were well compensated for this move.
I think this is going to be a regular thing. Obviously, I'm not speaking regular. It's going to be 90%, but we're going to see this every cycle. We'll see it again in the spring portal. It's just going to be how it works from now on. They're going to reach out and say, "Look, I had a really good season." I don't want to speak out of turn or anything, but like I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen a bigger name, and I don't want to speculate like a Ryan Williams. I see Twitter, all these fake accounts throwing things out there like he's transferring. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these guys are going to feel that they deserve a little bit more than what they put on after putting up what they did on the field. And they're going to reach back out and say, hey, like if we can't get a little bit more here, I'm probably going to look elsewhere because I think I can get that. So we're going to see this a lot more often than not. And fans are going to hate it. Coaches are going to hate it even more. But it's a business now. And that's really what they just want to be compensated for what they do. And I don't hate it, like you said.
I think it's restricted free agency, right? The team, Alabama, Auburn, in this situation with Mbakwe and both Amaris Williams, they're going to have the right of first refusal. I think that's really kind of what it comes down to. Mbakwe supposedly was linked to Ole Miss. And if you're Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, you can't let a first-round talent, because that's what Mbakwe is. Even in the limited snaps that he played this year, you turn him the tape and you say, this guy's a potential first-round draft pick in Jalen Mbakwe. You can't let him go, and you can't let him go to Ole Miss. That just cannot be done. So Alabama obviously having one of those moments where they got to regroup, find a way to keep this guy in the fold. And the same goes with Auburn. It's just funny, right? You always think, like, why is it always my team that has problems with? You're an Alabama fan, you can look at Auburn. And if you're an Auburn fan, you can look at Alabama. Everybody's got the same problems. So interesting to see there.
Just thinking out loud, like, is there a negative to this? Do you think there's ever going to be a point where the school is just like, all right, you want to enter the portal and bounce, play hardball? We're moving on. Like, do you see any negative for the player if we're talking elite, cream of the crop type kid?
Lack of continuity. I think we've seen this before with Bear Alexander. I think we've seen it with Julian Humphrey a little bit. They go to the well, they get a raise, and then they come back and say, hold on, if I was able to get the raise the first time, why wouldn't they do it again? And then they go back, and you look at Julian Humphrey, who I believe was in a similar situation, obviously gets benched for Daniel Harris. But I think that was one of those situations where he's leaving his team before the SEC championship. Those are all things, and I get it, in a player movement world that we're in now, you're not going to get dinged for it as much. But all these guys with that type of talent, a Humphrey, a Bear Alexander, they're all going to have to answer very tough questions when they go interview with these NFL teams, right? And it's a lot different there. So that's going to be the fascinating part. Yeah, I think the lack of continuity ultimately hurts. Now you got to go to a new place. You got to learn a new environment. You got new coaches. You got new locker room. That's a lot, right? The biggest thing, I think, is access to the field development, and continuity really benefits these guys long-term as well. Moving down here, LSU, one of those teams I think we talked about, the last couple of days before signing day. It was hard to kind of pin them. They lose Bryce Underwood. They lose Cade Phillips, who in his own right is probably one of the best corners in the country. He is, and a guy that, quite honestly, could be a 5-star at the end of the day. So you're looking at LSU. They did all this great work throughout the cycle. They lose those two. They go out there. They're able to hold on to DJ Pickett. They're able to flip Solomon Thomas from
lost
Florida
Derek
State.
Meadows as well.
They lose Derek Meadows to Alabama. And you're like, if I'm an LSU fan, like, I'm so-so. I'm okay. It's not the worst case scenario. It's not the best. Probably somewhere in the middle. But if you fast forward and you say, all right, what do they need to do in the transfer portal to make me feel a lot better about this situation in the short term, the 2025 outlook? This would be it. I mean, they're doing it. You look at what LSU has been able to do. Nick Anderson, Barry and Brown, they get from Oklahoma and Kentucky. I didn't think receiver was an overwhelming need, but surrounding Garrett Nussmeier, who a lot of people think could be a day one guy if he comes back for another year, they're in good shape. Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma, what they've done defensively as well. Jakeem Jackson, Delane from Virginia Tech, Jack Pyburn from Florida. Dude, LSU right now, it's got a matchup on the field, but it's almost kind of like they looked up and it's like, all right, Bryce Underwood's moving on. Jakeem Stewart's going to USC. Well, we had a pot of gold allocated for each of these guys. Now, all of a sudden, you can kind of spread that wealth out over 4 or 5 potential starters.
I think the only person happier than Brian Kelly at this point is probably Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, what they did in the portal is tremendous. And you kind of go back, and we brought up Bryce Underwood. I think, yeah, it's a blow. He's an elite special talent, a guy that in the next couple of years could be the number 1 overall player in the country. But when you know you have Garrett Nussmeier back coming in, I think that's kind of it's okay. It's not a huge deal. You can find another guy that's an elite talent, but you got to land him next year because you got to keep it rolling. But in this day and age with the portal, as long as you land a top-tier quarterback, you're going to get guys around him. But what LSU's done this offseason, I was a little skeptical with them on the recruiting side of things, especially with Brian Kelly leading the show there. But what they've done in the portal has been phenomenal. If you're an LSU fan, you got to be fired up right now. You got guys coming in, difference makers, guys that are going to take Garrett Nussmeier for a guy that may be a fringe first-rounder to a surefire, in my opinion, first-rounder next year. I think he's going to have a monster season, and it really revolves around what they currently have, but also what they brought in with the portal.
Yeah, they're not done yet either. I mean, I think they're hunting for a starting tackle. You're probably looking at 2 bodies that they want to bring in. They want some competition at the tackle spot. The tackle from Washington State, a guy that was banged up last year, I'm blanking on the name. It's a Polynesian name, and I don't want to butcher it out of respect to him. Yeah, where's Blair Angulo when you need him? But LSU right now not done, doing an impressive job. We'll talk about some other teams doing an impressive job as well. But we got our first question from YouTube to Tom and Coop from Kanan Torres. Kanan, thank you as always for listening. He says, how would you like to fit for Isaiah World at any of his top 3, A&M, Nebraska, and Oregon? Isaiah World, one of the top tackles in the country. And a guy, if you talk to some NFL scouts, I mean, these guys are really, really high on this guy, and you can understand why. 6'8", over 330 pounds, from Nevada. He's raw. But what I'm learning about the tackle market is if you're big, you're long, you got functional athleticism and a pulse, you're going to get compensated, and it's going to be a very competitive market. So you mentioned those schools. I think Oregon just got a tackle from Texas State. I'm excited to dive into the tape there. But I think if you're Texas A&M or Nebraska, the other school linked to the tackle from Wazoo. Obviously, those are needy teams, but I think this is one of the best plug-and-play options. Is he perfect? No, but from what we see on the portal market, teams are doing a better job playing defense. This would be one of the best guys that you can absolutely get. Guys, like I said, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're watching us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, if you're watching us on X, also make sure to like and retweet as well. Let's keep it going here. Colorado, man, they're not done. Jaheim Otis, big interior defensive lineman, the number 1 defensive lineman in the country per 24/7 Sports, ranked in the top 15. Had a great freshman year at Alabama. Obviously, things change. Kane Womack comes in, new defensive coordinator, kind of gets schemed out. Had some knee issues that I think maybe held some teams up a little bit. Now he's going to get the chance to go to Colorado, work with a Hall of Famer, Gold Jacket, and Warren Sapp. And if you're Colorado, we talk about it all the time. I mean, this is a team that's got an opportunity to win 10 games. Where do you get your beef from, right? We always talk about it with those West Coast schools. The opportunity to go pull a Jaheim Otis, even with the other stuff, maybe, he's scared some teams off medically. You got to do it if you're Deion Sanders in Colorado. I love the aggressiveness here, and I like the fit as well.
I think if you're Colorado, you have nothing to lose here. And honestly, this is a perfect move for Jaheim Otis. There's a need for him. He's going to be coached up at a high level because when this dude stays healthy, he is a bad man. So love the fit at Colorado. I think he's going to prove to be a difference maker as long as he stays healthy because his game is going to be taken up another notch with Warren Sapp leading the charge there.
All right, let's talk about a team that I don't think many of us expected to talk about. Texas Tech, man, and what they're doing. Joey McGuire, Mr. Blanchard there, the general manager. You look at Texas Tech, the season that they had this year, they are, let's call it penny for penny, probably one of the most aggressive teams in the transfer portal right now with what they've done. I got to take a look at the transfer portal rankings. They're changing by the minute, but a top 5 class. And you think about these guys. Lee Hunter, they get from UCF, big body interior defensive lineman. Terrence Carter, they get out of Louisiana Lafayette, the tight end, one of my favorites. Bryce Pollock, they take from Mississippi State, the corner. Reggie Virgil from Miami, Ohio. Hunter Zambrano, their number 1 interior offensive lineman from us for Illinois State. And then maybe one of my favorite players in the entire portal, Cole Wisniewski, FCS All-American from North Dakota State. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine this morning. You know what's funny? I think we're getting to the point with the transfer portal where a lot of teams have done a really good job in terms of, getting it going from a financial standpoint. But who's the most aligned? Not only from a financial allocation standpoint, but from a talent identification standpoint. Who can match their board with their financial investment? You look at the top teams right now, you got to give a ton of credit to Ole Miss. They seem to be a year or two ahead of everybody when it comes to the portal. You look at LSU, what they've been able to do. Austin Thomas has been huge there. And then you think about Blanchard, Texas Tech, Joey McGuire. And I want to give a shout out to Blanchard because I don't know if there's anybody giving more autonomy in the front office in college football than him. They've been awesome, man. They've been complete nails. And all of a sudden you're looking at Texas Tech and you're like, wow, at least from the scouting standpoint, how those guys could elevate this team. All of a sudden, the Big 12 that's wide open, Texas Tech looks like a legit contender.
Blanchard's an impressive cat. Got to hear from him at the symposium and here in Nashville, and I get it. I see why he's so well thought of by not only coaches but recruits, prospects, players. Everybody raves about him. So Texas Tech's in good hands there. Joey McGuire wants to win now. Doesn't want to wait till April. Doesn't want to wait till any other portal period. He is trying to take advantage and land guys now, and he's killing it. Texas Tech, you nailed it. They're doing a great job. The guy that really pops for me is Lee Hunter. I think he's had a good career at UCF, super productive. He's an immediate impact guy, a guy that can help, and this team wants to win right away. So they're not going to settle for average at Texas Tech, which I appreciate. I know everybody was worried about losing Micah Hudson and things like that to A&M, but I think that they've had a really, really good portal season, and they're moving in the right direction. They're recruiting at a high level. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Very few schools evaluate like they do, and we always talk about guys that are maybe lower or kind of appear on the recruiting process because Texas Tech offered, and then all of a sudden as they move on, all of a sudden he's got 30 offers, and he's a stock-up guy. So Texas Tech doing all the right things, kind of fired up about what they're going to do in the next couple of years. All
right, we're going to take a question here from Canes Cats, Heat 305. Guys, also stick around. We got Louisville quarterback Miller Moss joining us pretty soon. It says, question to both. When speaking to people, what does it take to land a free agent, meaning a player that will make an instant impact versus someone who is providing depth as a filler? Canes Cats hinted in his name that he's probably talking about Miami here. I think this comes down to financial compensation. It's been so interesting. We've been talking about North Carolina and why the fit might work with Bill Belichick is because the game right now, from a transactional standpoint, has never been more black and white. Now you got the revenue share coming down the pipe, and you're talking about the money being spent. Chris Hummer wrote about this. More money is being spent NIL-wise than it ever has been before in college football because, well, there's going to be a new revenue stream for these teams to tap into in 6 months when the revenue share comes down. So obviously teams are being aggressive right now, but I think the market obviously dictates what the difference is between a caliber starter and a depth guy. And I'll tell you this, the margin is thin, man. Just going through the rankings, you go down the list, and I was talking to a team last night, who was looking in the receiver market, and it's like, hey, for that quality of team, or we're talking about a top 25 team that can push for a college football playoff spot, you got 12 to 15 guys. But those 12 to 15 guys are getting recruited just as heavily by the same type of profile of a program. So, it bottlenecks, and what you're seeing is these prices are being driven up.
I think you nailed it. I mean, it's really just dollars and cents, and it comes down to the financial opportunities that a program is going to obviously give them a leg up over somebody else. But I also look at, the quarterback position, especially. We talked about Luke Kromenhoek earlier and picking Mississippi State. Like, again, I don't know if Mississippi State had the highest offer, but if he's deciding between $1 million here or $500,000 here, but for $500,000, maybe I can go work with Jeff Lebby, a quarterback guru, essentially, somebody that's going to take my talent to the next level, something that I need. I'm going to take a little less money now, knowing that I'm going to get coached up, which is going to pay off, tenfold in the long run. So I think there's just a balance between looking at the depth chart, the financials, and the coaching, especially because all these guys nitpicking over a couple $100,000 right now, they need to look what's going to put them in the best position long term, because that's where the real money is.
All right, guys, the portal is hot. We got postseason football, high school football, All-American Bowl, UA game. Our Hudson Standish is down there at the Shrine Bowl, covering the Shrine Bowl of the Carolinas. And you can find all of that coverage right here at 247sports.com. Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates as well. Make sure to like and subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube channel while you're at it. Our great team got you covered coast to coast. And with that, we'll now welcome in Louisville quarterback Miller Moss, former USC transfer. And Miller, appreciate you joining us today, man. I know you've been busy, but first question I got to ask you, and especially for somebody that plays your position, can you dive in a little bit and talk to me about how different the process is being recruited out of high school to this really accelerated process at the collegiate level? All of a sudden you decide to put your name in the transfer portal, and I'm sure you're getting phone calls from God knows who trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first off, just thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. I think, you spoke to the difference in processes, and obviously I went through it at a high school level and, slight like a year before NIL really became a significant thing within college football. So I think it's different in two different ways. First, just in you don't have that 2-3 year runway to make a decision. It's really you take your visits over the course of a week and you got to make a decision, because these teams that have needs in certain areas, if they don't get you, they obviously have to have, plan B, C, and D. And then obviously, you guys touched on it, but the financial aspect is thrown in there just with every kid's recruiting process now, which is kind of interesting.
Miller, we already spoke about your decision to pick Louisville, but I kind of want to look before we dive into that. You obviously, there was some highs, there was some lows. You played for your dream school at USC, California native. I mean, playing for the Trojans as a quarterback, it's a special legacy there. But like I said, there were some highs, some lows. Kind of take me through the last year this fall and just kind of how it impacted you mentally, whether it's negative or positive.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, there were some pretty high highs, and then obviously, some lows in there as well. I think it was an interesting year at SC. Obviously, started really high, lost a tough game in Michigan, bounced back, and handled Wisconsin in a positive way, and then just kind of had a lot of things, not break our way for people that followed us closely. But like you said, I think I learned a tremendous amount, about myself, about what it takes to win, and just about my dedication to the game overall. So I don't know, in my experience, the tougher things you go through are what really shape you, and I'm hoping that's the case once again.
Miller, we know about Jeff Brom's pedigree and obviously the way that he can develop quarterbacks. We look at Tyler Shuck, we look at Jack Plummer, some of those guys as well. Why was it Louisville for you at the end of the day over some of the other suitors?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just really touched on it. I think Coach Brom's ability to consistently put guys in the NFL really stood out to me, and I think the opportunity that school has and the way that program has trended in the last couple of years to go win a conference championship was also really attractive. So I think Coach Brom does a really good job. There really were some parallels in terms of my high school situation, just with playing for the Clausens. Casey Clausen was my head coach, Rick Clausen was my offensive coordinator. And then Jimmy kind of came around as he wanted to. But it's kind of a similar deal, just with obviously Coach Jeff Brom being the head coach and Brian being on staff, and then Brady being around the building and everything like that. So it was a real, family environment and something that I felt comfortable within.
Miller, you and I spoke after the Missouri trip, and it was clear that Missouri made a big move. Then obviously you take the trip to Louisville, and obviously they moved the needle and eventually landed your commitment. But for both fan bases, I kind of want you to shed a little light on how close this really was between the Tigers and the Cardinals.
Yeah, it was a really difficult decision, kind of like we talked about. I mean, Coach Drank, Coach Kirby Moore, Sean Gleason, they do a really, really good job there. And like you said, made a heck of an impression. This really came down to the last hour. But like I said, when it came down to it, talking with people that I trust and care about and that I value their opinion, Coach Brom's ability to consistently put people in the NFL is what, and his pedigree of doing so is really what kind of moves the needle. But I don't want to discredit Missouri at all. I think Coach Drink and that program are going to have a ton of success, and they were first class in everything they did, and I wish them nothing but the best. I mean, so part of me wishes I could go to both, but obviously, you can't do that. So ended up choosing one. But yeah, like you said, they made a heck of an impression, and I wish that program nothing but the best.
From the time you make your decision to go to Louisville, I mean, how quickly do you put on that recruiting hat, which has got to be crazy, right? Because you're still finding out a lot about this program. But me, I'm looking at USC. There are a couple guys that have entered the portal that are some pretty dynamic pass catchers. I just wonder, all right, what do the last, 96 hours look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think almost immediately you transition to that, putting that recruiting hat on and trying to build the best possible roster you can be, especially now with the opportunity to attract so much talent in the portal. Obviously, at SC, there are a bunch of guys that decided that, it was in their best interest to leave, and, everybody has to do what's best for them at the end of the day. And I have a great relationship with those guys and love to play with them, but, they have to make the best decision for them, just like I had to make the best decision for me.
When you were looking at the couple guys in the we're talking about Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, a bunch of guys, but when you were at USC, what was, and it could be practice, game field, whatever, who were some of the guys that you really enjoyed throwing to, connecting with, and who did you feel like you really developed the best relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite part, at least, about USC was the relationship with the guys in the locker room and at the school. I think that's what kept me there for the time that, I was there. I mean, you touched on a few, obviously, Zach, Deuce, Jacoby Lane, Makai Lemon, Kyron Hudson, Kyle Ford. That was one thing that was unique about that room, is there was so much talent and so many different personalities. But yeah, like I said, the relationships and the people within that locker room are really special, and a big reason why I was there for the time that I was.
Miller, this might seem like a dumb question, maybe a simple question. Obviously, you're going to have high goals, but what is the driving motivation at Louisville? What would you and your team like to accomplish next year, not only for yourself, but as an organization and a program?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a tremendous honor to deliver Coach Brom his first ACC championship as the head coach of Louisville, and then go on to have success down the road. I mean, obviously, I've been a part of this for a little bit now, so I understand that, making predictions or stating goals in December doesn't mean a ton, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. But I think that'd be awesome and really good for the school, the university, and obviously the city of Louisville.
Miller Moss, appreciate you, man. As always, best of luck the rest of the way, and put that recruiting hat on.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
All right, man. Appreciate you jumping on. Guys, just a reminder, you can find the 105 every Monday and Wednesday. Monday on CBS Sports Network at 2 o'clock Eastern. Wednesday right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, 1 o'clock Eastern. And wherever you find your podcast, make sure to like and subscribe. Impressive young man there, Tom. Well, you've known him for quite some time. I'll tell you what, I love the fit. You think about what Jeff Brom has been able to do with those type of quarterbacks. I talked about Tyler Shuck. I talked about Jack Plummer, all guys that are probably more day three or priority free agents. Miller Moss, man, the more you dissect his game a little bit, there's a lot to like. And I think the other thing is so funny. I was talking to Ryan Wilson at CBS Sports about this. So much grace given to Garrett Nussmeier, first-year starter, and everybody loves the talent. They love the arm. And it's like, man, this is Miller Moss's first year starting too. I think the things where maybe he struggled, you can talk about the decision-making areas of his game where he wants to get better from an accuracy standpoint. They're all coachable. They're all correctable. Now you put him with Jeff Brom. I mean, shoot, man, I think the sky's the limit, and we'll see how they kind of wrap up this portal. But in terms of the quarterback and the head coach fit, I love it.
Yeah, there is not many more impressive kids that I've ever dealt with than Miller Moss. Smartest kid in the room when you get to know him. His mom's the same way. Great family. And I love the fit. I think that you talked about any potential issues there can be coached, it can be corrected, and he did it. He picked the perfect fit at Louisville, and he really couldn't have gone wrong at Missouri either. But I just love the fit at Missouri. I'm sorry, at Louisville. I think that the connection with the coaching staff, there's going to be playmakers around him. But yeah, very, very impressive kid. And I'm going to be very clear about this. I don't think he was USC's issues last year. I think that they could have and probably should have just kind of wrote it out with him. And maybe they wanted a spark, a fresh start, whatever the case may be. This was the best move for Miller Moss, and I think he's going to thrive in that system, fired up about what's going to happen over the next year.
Everything happens for a reason. You think about Jaden Maeva and the opportunity that he got the last couple games. I think it was less about Miller Moss, more about, hey, we're just trying to find some momentum here to end the season. So we'll see what happens. New challenges ahead for Miller Moss in Louisville and Jeff Brom, and we'll see how it goes. We appreciate him jumping on with us. But now time for some 2026 talk. It just never ends, man. This calendar is relentless. So let's stick with the headliners. Let's talk about the guys at the top of the board. I'm glad we got you on the show, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some of these names. And we'll do some quick hitters on these guys. But let's start with five-star quarterback Faison Brandon, committed to Tennessee. Tom, he's going to be throwing at the All-American Bowl, which is pretty interesting. It's not often you get guys with that caliber of talent, not just the talent, but that stature in terms of where they are in the rankings to come to these events. I think one of the more obviously physically impressive kids in the country. I'm excited to get to see him in San Antonio whip it around a little bit.
Tennessee fans, just to be very clear, you have nothing to worry about at this point. The Vols should be very confident that he is locked in. I know there was some chatter. Anna Adams does a great job. She even reached out. Hey, Bill Belichick comes to North Carolina kid. Anything to worry about? He is locked in with the Vols. So on the recruiting side of things, not a lot of drama there. Tennessee fans should feel really good. But for me, I reached out to him, and I didn't expect to get this answer. But I was like, hey, you're the number one player in the country. You're our guy. Like, do you want to come to San Antonio and throw it around at the underclassmen combine? I know you don't technically have anything to prove. All of our guys love you. And he said immediately yes. And then I was like, all right, well, make sure you can check with some people, make sure it's good. He was fired up, and he wanted to throw and show out against anybody else who's there and prove that he's the number one guy in the country. But I want to push back to you. You've been in the personnel, the coaching business, and now obviously on the scouting side with 24/7. What does the fact that he wants to do this and not just sit at home, chill, do basketball, anything like that, what does that do for you, kind of looking at the number one player still wants to go show out?
I'm glad he's doing it. I don't overvalue it, and I don't undervalue it. If Faison Brandon said, hey, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to spend some more time with my family. Maybe there's some other things that I wanted to do. I mean, that wouldn't be a knock as well. We've seen that. I mean, go back to the Elite 11 finals, and that was Arch Manning that didn't participate, and then it was Bryce Underwood. You have two of those guys that finished number one quarterback in the country. These guys go through a lot, man, and physically, mentally, long season as well. So, if they didn't have any interest in doing that, then, fine by me. And if they want to do it, great. I don't think it moves the needle one way or the other. But I'm glad I'm going to get to see him. Yeah. Right? It's always great when you get to have multiple exposure points with these guys. Speaking of talented, Zion Ely, number one pass rusher in the country. He's committed to Maryland. Simple question here. Will that stick?
I don't think so. And I'm not ruling out Maryland. I'm just making my, call it a crystal ball prediction. I think he ends up elsewhere in the long term. I think really what this did was it put a target on the back of Maryland. And it essentially Zion was saying, hey, if you want me, come and get me. And I think that Oregon has been in a really good spot. I think Ohio State's been in the picture, Penn State. But the one I'm watching, and it seems like we talk about this every year, is Dan Lanning and the Ducks. He's been out there multiple times. He's loved every visit. I believe Oregon's been the team to beat for a long time. And yet he kind of comes out of nowhere and makes a commitment to Maryland. And shout out to the Terps getting it done, but Maryland's got to start winning some games, and I'm kind of fired up about the direction in the future. You got a guy that we love at Malik Washington coming in at quarterback, so a lot to like, and they could turn it around quickly. But again, I think this one has a long way to go. Maryland, essentially, publicly, he claimed them as his leader. Long way to go, but I don't think this one sticks.
All right, let's talk about the number one tackle in the country, Jackson Cantwell. You think about him. I mean, both parents, Olympians, I believe, in the shot in the disc. This guy, specimen, definitely got the genes from his parents. Schools involved here, Ohio State, Michigan, you got Missouri, A&M in Oregon. What's the latest on him?
Fresh off visits to Ohio State and Michigan that went really well. Mike Roach, if you haven't seen it, over 24/7 Sports, great story recapping both trips. He's a great interview, by the way. Jackson Cantwell just gives a ton of juice on every trip. But the ones I'm watching kind of moving forward, Missouri, Texas A&M, Oregon. I wouldn't rule out Nebraska either, but I think Missouri's got a lot working in their favor. And then Texas A&M, what they've been doing on the recruiting trail under Mike Elko, Derek Miller behind the scenes, that whole staff is doing a really good job of connecting with guys. They're targeting the right guys, and Cantwell sees a fit in College Station. And then obviously Oregon, we've said it a million times, Dan Lanning, they essentially feel like they get who they want, and they are all over Jackson Cantwell. Do not sleep on them.
Love a good Papa Roach recruiting story.
Shout out Papa
Fires me up.
Roach.
Papa Roach, if you're out there, we appreciate you, man. All right, next one up, Tristan Keys, wide receiver, one of the most dynamic guys in the country. Tennessee, the Cristobal favorite, obviously has a close relationship with the number one quarterback in the country in FaZe and Brandon. What are you feeling here?
Yeah, that's where my crystal ball is at. I feel good about the Vols. I'm not saying he's made a silent commitment or anything like that, but he's been up there a couple times, loves every trip to Knoxville. And, yeah, he's connected really well with Faison Brandon. I don't know if they met at the Future 50 event, but they definitely got along, chopped it up a bit about potentially playing together at the next level. A&M's definitely in it. You got Bama, and once again, you got Oregon involved. So I wouldn't say a long way to go. I could see him getting it done early this offseason. But, again, that is a guy who stock up, man. I know you guys have him as a 5-star. He has just been continuing to soar up the recruiting rankings. Coaches love him. I'm a big fan. I think there is so much to like about that kid. He is a day one kind of impact guy once he gets to college.
All right, another big offensive lineman, Emmanuel Iheanacho. Everybody and their mother is in this one. Penn State, Maryland, Alabama, the list goes on and on. Long story short, seems like we got a long way to go here.
I think between him and Jackson Cantwell, we keep talking about these early decisions guys make, naming leaders. I could see both of these kind of running the table and being late in the process final decisions. I don't really get a vibe in getting to know either of them that they want to make a decision early and then back off. I think both want to make a decision, make a commitment, and then do their best to recruit and build connections with those guys. They don't seem like the decommitment type, which means they'll probably commit tomorrow and decommit a week later. But I think that they're going to kind of run the table, really be patient with the process and make a decision. But you mentioned it, Penn State, Maryland, Alabama, the list goes on. Ohio State was a school. The first time I talked to him, he really wanted an offer from the Buckeyes. Ohio State jumped in, so keep an eye on them.
All right, let's talk some quarterbacks. You got Ryder Lyons, who, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially a 2027 target with the mission. And then you got Jared Curtis as well. It seems like everybody's involved here. Break it down for me in very simple terms, the teams to watch here for both Ryder Lyons and Jared Curtis.
So you got USC is where my crystal ball is at for Ryder Lyons, and I have felt great about that day one, and I am very confident that as we stand today, USC is still probably the leader for him. I was more confident right before the season, but things haven't gone exactly according to plan for Lincoln Riley and USC. So that's opened the door for multiple teams. Oregon is absolutely one to watch. Again, Dan Lanning and that group, Will Stein and all them doing a great job. You got Ole Miss is kind of a sleeper in this one, and Alabama as well. He took trips to both. They kind of wowed him at that point and really entered the race because really early on it was going to be USC or Oregon. I'm not ready to, call that one a complete done recruitment at this point. And then with Jared Curtis, former Georgia commit, looking at Georgia still, South Carolina, Oregon, USC, Bama, Ohio State, a lot of crossover. When he first committed to Georgia, he was very close to committing to Ohio State. Bill O'Brien left, Chip Kelly came in, kind of shook things up, didn't really feel comfortable there. If I were to really go out on a limb and put in a pick right now for Jared Curtis, I'm actually leaning towards South Carolina. I think the Gamecocks have laid it all on the table. They have been making him a priority, pushing all the right buttons when it comes to depth chart, NIL, everything like that. So, again, right now my best guess would be South Carolina for Jared Curtis and USC for Ryder Lyons.
Jared Curtis B-roll was a little shaky there, brother.
It wasn't mine.
Got to get you going.
I just want to make it very clear that wasn't my video.
Andrew in the chat wants to know, you think about Jared Curtis and Oregon, what does that look like? You got Jaron Kiave, Sangapulatele, you also got Akili Smith. Is Oregon a possible fit there for Jared Curtis?
Jared Curtis, after seeing him, and you saw him as well, I've seen him twice this year, and also a throwing session. He should not be afraid of any single person in the 25 class or the 26 class when he picks the school. He is that talented of a prospect, special kid. He could be playing college ball in terms of the physical approach, how he looks. the arm talent, the arm strength. He is an incredible talent, and he shouldn't be afraid of anybody. So whoever Oregon's got, whoever Alabama's got, Keelan Russell even, like, that kid needs to not be afraid of anybody. So he can go anywhere.
I know Andrew Ivins is watching. I think he's a little afraid that you're coming for his job right now.
I'm just here for it, dude.
Hey, Doss, assistant director
I'm going
of scouting.
completely rogue right now.
He's going in. Tom, a couple of these quick fire on. Four-star linebacker Xavier Griffin committed to USC. Got Rodney Dunham with the top 8, one of the top edges in the country. Then Sedarian Morgan, one of the more dynamic, big, physical specimens at the receiver position.
We've seen the Georgia top-tier prospect commit to USC, and it doesn't stick. My best guess at this point is that it doesn't with Xavier Griffin as well. And I hate to say it, but he's a top priority from USC, so we'll see what happens there. But again, Georgia's going to be one to watch there. A bunch of other schools in play, but it's going to be tough to bet against Georgia when it comes to Xavier Griffin. Rodney Dunham released a top 8 that included South Carolina, Notre Dame, Florida State, Duke, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, and Ohio State. I am watching South Carolina, Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Duke. High academic kid, really, really good baseball player as well. So those are kind of the 4 I'm watching. We'll see if Bill Belichick can get UNC back in play. They got eliminated at last crack. And then last one will be Sedarian Morgan, a guy that you guys have been higher on him than anybody. My crystal ball, I think, right now is on Alabama, but I'm also watching out for Auburn, Florida, Oregon, and Tennessee. But in the end, that kid is from the Yellowhammer State. I do not see him leaving home. I think it'll be Alabama or Auburn, both doing a great job on the recruiting front. Receiver, they're going to have really good quarterbacks. You got Deuce Knight, Keelan Russell. He can't go wrong with either option.
Tom Loy, appreciate it, buddy. It's been fun. Love to see you cook, man. In your
Always
element.
fun, dude.
2026.
Always
Can't
fun.
wait for the 2027, 2028, 2041. Ryder Ivins, we're ready for you as well. Guys, we appreciate you watching. As always, just a reminder, you can find the 105 every Monday and Wednesday. Like I said earlier, CBS Sports Network on Monday, Wednesday, right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, and on X, and wherever you find your podcast. For Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Patagna. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.